more hostages have been released as a tenuous ceasefire between Hamas and Israel seems to be holding. Yesterday, Hamas released 11 hostages into Israel on Monday in exchange for 33 Palestinian civilians from an Israeli prison. Now, according to Al Jazeera, 17 of the Palestinian prisoners were minors, 15 boys and 2 girls. The remaining 22 were adult women. Palestinians' common offenses for the prisoners were accusations of threatening security officers, entering Israel illegally without a permit, supporting terrorism, and also associating with hostile or unknown organizations.
Important to note, many of the prisoners were never formally convicted of terrorism, something Ambassador of Israel to the United States, Michael Herzog, appeared to lie about recently on CNN. Let's watch.
39 Palestinian prisoners, we're told, were released today. Do you intend to, along with the potential release of Israeli hostages or civilian hostages who are held in Gaza, to continue to release Palestinian prisoners?
The short answer is yes. Let me just refer to that and remind everybody that the prisoners that we released are people who were convicted for participating in terror attacks. Let's don't forget that Yahya Sinwar was released in such a deal by Israel in 2011. Look what we got.
Yeah, well, a lot of them are accused, some are convicted, but some have not yet been adjudicated. I think that's fair to say.
They went through a legal process in Israel. We didn't kidnap them.
That is true.
We don't arrest people just for nothing.
That's a very important distinction.
On a similar note, as conflicting reports on whether or not the Israeli hostages have been permitted to speak to the press after being released by Hamas mount, a series of dual media narratives have sprouted up. Some speculate that after the last series of released hostages said some kind things about how they were treated by Hamas in a viral video, Israel is trying to silence this narrative. As a refresher, here's some of that video.
Bye now. Goodbye. Welcome.
The contents of this video have been debated. The Israeli government tweeted out the video with the caption, "Keep waving. Hamas murdered their loved ones. Hamas violently kidnapped them from their homes. Hamas held them hostage for 49 days. Now smile at the camera and wave goodbye so the world will think they're human. Hamas is evil." But pro-Palestinian critics said the video depicts grateful Israelis thankful that Hamas treated them with kindness. One critic tweeted, "Israel released hostages, broke the propaganda machine. Either Hamas gave them Hollywood-level acting classes or the Israeli propaganda machine is broken."
Yeah, so this hostage discourse has been all over the place. One other story I think that was making news was that there was one father who had spoken to the press, said that he was glad that his daughter had been killed by Hamas because being taken captive would have been a fate worse than death. And then it said he had saw her body and grieved over it. And then it turns out that she was one of the kids that was released by Hamas. And there was a heartwarming video of them hugging each other. But the framing of it, again, him being so clear that he had knew that she was died because he identified her body, and also that he was hopeful that she had died because being a hostage was face worse than death, caused many to both speculate on the credibility of some of the reports that are coming out of Israel. And this, again, the framing of it as the barbarism of Hamas means that it's better to die. And what does it mean when you have your daughter safely returned to you? Does that undermine the narrative that's being put out there by Israel in the first place? Of course, taking hostages is a war crime and obviously condemnable in and of itself, but that's not the argument that Israel is making, right? It's that there's something particularly barbaric about Hamas and, according to some interlocutors in Israel, all of the people of Palestine.
Yeah, look, I'm glad they treated the hostages well, if that's indeed the case. Frankly, it's not surprising that they would treat them well from their own self-preservation perspective. The hostages are their bargaining chips. Like living hostages are their bargaining chips for what they're trying to accomplish. So they don't really have much incentive to to harm them. If they're not harming them, I'm glad that's the fact. Again, I don't think we need to fall. I don't need to fall over myself commending Hamas for not causing more harm to people they abducted from their homes and from a music festival and from other places as they were shooting the people all around them. So that's fine. Obviously, and then I would say, look, on the Palestinians being held by Israel, I think the distinction the ambassador was drawing there, and you probably know a lot more about this than I do, but it looks like many of them who are detained undergo this kind of military tribunal procedure that has a lot of civil liberties issues with it, where they're not meaningfully able to see the evidence against them, and in some cases don't get access to counsel. Look, I would find fault with that as a procedure, regardless of what governing body was doing it. If these people are dangerous, if they're criminals, if they're murderers, if they're terrorists, they need to, prove that beyond reasonable doubt in a respectable, in a court setting where the accused has every means capable of defending themselves. Obviously, in the U.S., we detain people for longer than we ought to because of backlogs and all those kinds of things. So I don't know if that's the case in some of these circumstances. But look, if they're innocent people, they should just be released regardless of it part of some exchange. Now, Hamas doesn't get to grab random people and hold them for ransom in order to get that. Those people are not at fault. So it's not any kind of equivalency, but they should just release people. They should charge them, convict them in fair proceedings, and then release them if they're not doing that.
I agree, but there's a lot of shoulds, and we should talk about what is actually taking place. And what is become clear to people is that it is suspicious, unnerving, in fact, to find out that Israel has thousands and thousands of Palestinian prisoners, ready hostages, you could call them, given that they haven't actually been convicted of a crime, ready to exchange for the Israeli hostages. Many of whom, let's not skirt over this reality as well, are literal children. Of the 33 that were released on Monday, 17 were minors, that 15 boys and 2 little girls. The remaining 22 were adult women. Now, of course, women can commit crimes. I'm not saying that at all.
And so can teenage boys.
Well, this is an argument that at least one Israeli official made recently, that these aren't really children. The Palestinian hostages aren't children. So, Israeli teenagers can commit crimes too. Israeli kids can be bad kids as well. The argument that's being made here is when the media is talking about the prisoner releases, the hostage releases, they're saying things like, X number of Israeli children were released, as well as X number of Palestinian minors. Using the term minor suggests a kind of criminality and culpability that has not been proven by any legitimate justice system, even, and in some cases, not even by the military justice system that is being applied to some of these Palestinian captives.
And if it's not been, then they should, again, charge them, convict them in fair proceedings, or let them go. With teenage males in particular, and this is not at all unique to the Palestinian situation. This is true here in D.C. for the crime and carjacking increases we've had. It's disproportionately, wildly being committed by teenage males in the 14 to 18 demographic. I mean, that's a huge category of crime in every. So the fact that they're minor, that people in that age bracket.
I think what people are objecting to when we're talking about minors is the idea that they would not have been convicted in a fair court of law, in a just court of law, and also that they're being treated very poorly and kept there for years of their life. So, for example, there was a story going around about 2 young men who had been first arrested when they were ages 4 and 5. 4 and 5 was the first time that they were taken into custody. They're now
been in custody that entire time?
No. They are now 17 and 18, and they had been in serving 2-year sentences. And that there were 2 of the ones that have just been released.
And what were they charged with?
What were they charged with? They weren't convicted of anything. That's the issue. None of these people are being convicted in the same court of law that an Israeli citizen would be subjected to.
These were the pair that the allegation was that they tried to stab someone?
No.
Right? There's no allegation whatsoever.
I don't know anything about any stabbing allegation. I put the link in the chat if you want to Google their names in the interim. There was another young kid, Mohammed Nazal, who was released from jail, who talked about how he was treated, including systemic torture of the prisoners. So we say it's in Hamas's best interest to treat prisoners well. Obviously, Israel doesn't feel the same way. There was a family member of one of the Israeli hostages who was begging Netanyahu and other state officials to stop saying we're treating the Palestinian captives poorly, because he felt like you did, that it could potentially imperil his loved one that was cut by Hamas. The Israeli state doesn't seem to feel that way, as it routinely abuses the Palestinian prisoners, including children that are being kept. So again, this isn't about false equivalency, but it is asking this question: if the argument for why Israel is justified in killing 20,000 Gazans over the course of the last 7 weeks is that they are particularly barbaric, and you're seeing evidence of the similar kind of state violence and barbarism happening in Israel toward the people of Palestine, then how can you continue to justify the wildly now disproportionate response that you've seen inflicted upon innocent children and others in Gaza disproportionately? I think the stat by Israel's own accounting is something like only 1,000 out of the 20,000 killed are being argued are Hamas. Is that a legitimate kind of target rate? And can you credibly be saying that you are in fact targeting Hamas when the overwhelming majority of people that you are killing and also punishing brutally in your prisons are in fact children and other innocents?
More Rising right after this.